Welcome, everyone, to the virtual launch of the Protected and Served Report, Voices on Anti-LGBTQ and HIV discrimination and abuse in the criminal legal system. My name is Sami Nemir Olivares. My pronouns are he, they, and I am a public information officer at Lambda Legal. Today, we will hear from three co-authors of this very important report, what the survey revealed, who we heard from in the report, as well as some of the findings and the recommendations for addressing discrimination and abuse in the criminal legal system. We will hear from the co-authors from Lambda Legal, the national civil rights organization dedicated to advancing civil rights for LGBTQ people and people living with HIV, as well as from Black and Pink National, a prison abolitionist organization dedicated to abolishing the criminal punishment system at the intersection of the LGBTQIA2S plus community. And we will also hear from Strength in Numbers Consulting Group, who facilitated and co-authored this report. And an important note for our audience is that please be aware that some of the findings and the stories from participants in the report may touch on difficult subjects such as violence and sexual abuse. Now, we will hear from the Protected and Served project manager, Richard Science. Richard, the first Protected and Served report was conducted in 2012, over a decade, and 10 years later, you all have embarked on a journey in a very gigantic project to conduct a second version. Can you tell us a little bit of why and why now? And also share with us more about the intention of this report and why are the issues raised in this report so important?
Sammy, thank you so much. And for everyone joining us, if you haven't already, please go to protectedandserved.org to check out the report as well as an executive summary and our spotlight report on detained participants. And thank you so much for joining us. So Sammy, 10 years ago, when Lambda Legal conducted the first Protected and Served, some of the questions we were trying to answer is what government misconduct, if any, existed in the criminal legal system. And from that report, it overwhelmingly showed that abuse, discrimination, violence is happening in the ways that our communities interact with the criminal legal system, including in prisons and jails, in policing, and also in schools and in the courts. This time around, a lot has changed over the past decade. I think just generally, people's understanding of how the criminal legal system impacts our communities, either through just the high rates of interaction that LGBTQ people and people living with HIV have with the different institutions, that bias and discrimination in the court system can actually undermine our community's trust in the courts. And as you know, the courts, including the Supreme Court, have been in the news a lot lately. And then I think a major shift happened in 2020 with the global pandemic, as well as the uprising and the protest against police violence, with the killing of George Floyd, and then the loss of so many people by police violence and racial violence in the summer of 2020. But so much organizing and just community awareness and support has been happening over the past decade that I think has changed how we even talk about these issues within the criminal legal system. So when Lambda Legal set out to do this version of the Protected and Served Community Survey, our intention was to partner with a national organization that will be able to help us highlight and lift up the experiences and stories of those directly impacted. Working with Black and Pink National, I think has been an exciting partnership and such a learning partnership, working with them and working with their members and hearing how incarceration impacts not only the individual, but also our entire community. Hearing how people who engage in sex work, how policing impacts them. Those are the things that we really wanted to get out in this community survey. And I think the findings will be really interesting to a number of people, community members, advocates, policymakers, people who work in the criminal legal system, to see how our community members experience the criminal legal system and the need to address the discrimination and abuse that is happening in the system, and how do we hold those responsible accountable.
Thank you so much, Richard, for that very important overview of this report and guiding people to go and read the report at protectedandserved.org. And as you say, many people might not realize how much work goes into conducting a survey like this. And I can imagine then turning this into something that is very usable for the broader community, that has an impact, and all of the details that goes into it. And for that, we have here Samjen Fraser from Strength in Numbers, who designed the survey and analyzed the data and co-wrote the report. Samjen, can you tell us about the methodology of this report and who we heard from in this report?
Thank you so much for allowing us to be part of this launch event. And thank you to Lambda Legal and to Black and Pink and to the Strength in Numbers team back in Brooklyn. We are really honored to be partnering with all of you on this important project. One thing that I think is really special about this survey, something I think we can all agree is really important when doing research on violence against LGBTQ+ and HIV affected communities and others who experience marginalization, is that we took input from people who work with the affected communities and who are members of those communities before we designed the survey. There are questions on this survey we would not have known to ask if those communities had not been so generous with their time and their expertise. These people included not only experts who focus on LGBTQ+ communities and people with HIV, but also those who work with people in detention, those affected by the criminal legal system, sex worker advocates, many others who you might not think of working with LGBTQ+ people and people with HIV, but who absolutely do, and who have great wisdom to help us field a survey like this. Doing a survey like this is a lot of work, and I also want to take a moment to thank all of those who took the survey and all of those who helped us by sending it to their lists and promoting it in their social media. Thank you all. One other unusual choice we made, in addition to taking so much input before we designed the survey, is that we included LGBTQ people and people living with HIV who were currently detained in prison, jail, juvenile detention, or immigration detention. We offered the opportunity for those participants to take the survey on paper. This is somewhat unusual now. We also offered the online survey in both English and Spanish. Both of these things really changed for the better the sample that we got, and I'm really glad that we were able to work with these excellent nonprofits and to get the survey to such a diverse group. We also wanted to mention that we asked a lot of open-ended questions, also called qualitative questions, about the experiences that we studied. So we asked structured questions about things like trust in police and the government, experiences of crime and hate incidents, experiences of reporting those incidents to police and to other organizations and people, abuse and violence experienced in court, detention, police settings, and schools. But we also asked people to really describe in their own words what the effects were of those experiences. I mentioned before that we were very happy with the diversity of the sample in this survey. We can always do better in this area, but we were really proud of the fact that over 1 in 5 survey participants were transgender, over 2 in 5 were people of color, and that the sample was also diverse in terms of income, education, and geography. As we find in many surveys of LGBTQ+ and HIV-affected populations, many of the people who took the survey had been homeless recently, which makes them uniquely vulnerable to government and police misconduct. This was about maybe 1 in 4 participants. Over 16% were detained when they took the survey, and even more, about 3 in 10, had been detained at some point in the past 5 years.
Thank you so much, Samjen, for this very important data and presentation. It seems that partnership and collaboration have played a major role in the success of this report. And we also have here Andrew Aleman, Deputy Director of People Power and National Partnerships at Black and Pink National. Andrew, can you share with us why this report was important for Black and Pink National, and how do you all collaborated with each other as well as with the broader community?
Well, hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm so glad to be here. We made it. We've been working so hard on this report for so long. And so I'm just excited to share this space with everybody here, sharing this space with Lambda Legal, Strength in Numbers. This has been an amazing collaboration, and we've been so excited to be a part of it. For Black and Pink, this was really easy. People that are system impacted, LGBTQ folks, Black and Brown LGBTQ folks don't always get to be a part of things like this, of telling our story, of being a part of sharing the impact of systems and the way in which we move through the world has on us. People talk about us a lot. People talk about Black and Brown leadership and Black and Brown LGBTQ folks, but when it comes to really spotlighting our experiences, we're not often at the table to really talk about that. So we were really excited to really be seen as an essential partner in this project. For us, this also gave us an opportunity to ensure our inside members had an opportunity to speak and share what has happened to them, how these systems have impacted the way in which they move through the world, and their ability to reach their full level of success and what thriving looks like for them, to ensure that we are talking about sex workers and that they see, themselves reflected, not as one or two participants within the survey sample, but really a larger representation of the sample. And then also, we wanted to just make sure that we are accountable to our people in our community. So we really reached out, had people look at the questions, as Samjan talked about, really thought through how do we tell these stories now that we have this information, and really got that feedback of what would be helpful for you. Now that we have all this amazing data, qualitative data, quantitative data, what do we do with it? It can feel cumbersome. And so talking to community to figure out how does this help you was something that really helped us form this report and helped us ensure that the recommendations and the storytelling and just the facts are told in the way that they are and in the way that they are experienced by our people. So this was very exciting for us to be a part of.
Thank you so much, Andrew, for sharing the important contributions of Black and Pink National and its members for this report. And now we would love to hear from all of you and see if we can share with viewers a little overview of what they can expect in this report. Can each of you share at least one key finding that stood out for you from the report?
Sure, and I can start because I want to also just let folks know as you go through the report, the way that we set up some of these issues, we wanted to make sure that different audiences could use this resource in their activism and also just understanding of the different topics. So you'll see the report is pretty detailed, but that's intentional. We included a glossary of some of the terms we used, and we also included throughout the report gray boxes that have different key topics or definitions that we think will be helpful for you to, one, understand the report and the survey and how we pose some of the questions, as well as just, as I mentioned earlier, how do we talk about these things? How has the language changed or evolved in how we're talking about some of these issues? So we hope that in itself is also an important tool that you gain from using the full report. So one of my findings that I really wanted folks to know about is that we did ask a series of questions about the experiences of people who had been in court. So with that question, it was, what was your role in court? Were you a party there? Were you a witness? Were you a judge? Were you an attorney? And we had a number of people, over 1/3 of the surveyed participants had been in court in the past 5 years. We did ask about their experiences, and you will find that a number of people experience different types of negative experiences while in court. We asked about the use of a wrong name or pronoun for transgender, gender nonconforming, and non-binary people, or TG and C and B community members. We talked about inappropriately revealing transgender status of a trans person, or inappropriately revealed someone's HIV status of people living with HIV. So there's a lot of data there, and we do try to give you a full context of understanding the numbers and the data. But the experiences of people in court really stood out for me as someone who goes to court, but also as another way that we can help educate the courts about the need for us to have fair access to the courts, and that when we are there as a party, that we have our fair day in court as well.
Thank you so much, Richard. Does anyone else wants to share a key finding?
I have a few thoughts that I hope are helpful. I think when you've been doing this work as long as I have, which is about 20 years, there's some things that just don't surprise you anymore. There were a lot of findings that were similar to 10 years ago. I wish I could say more progress had been made. There are still high rates of violence against LGBTQ people and people living with HIV. There are still some very poor experiences they're having when seeking services, when reporting to the police. These were not surprising to me. There were a few things that were surprising, though. I expected, given what I have learned about LGBTQ people and people living with HIV and police, that people would be almost universally mistrustful of the police and mistrustful of the institutions that govern the criminal legal system. And that was not the case. What I really saw was polarization. We're seeing that there are some people who find those institutions useful and many who do not, who have very negative opinions of them. But the bifurcation in those data, and not to overstate how generalizable they might be, but I wonder if it doesn't reflect a bit about our country and how people have polarized attitudes in our country about a lot of things. The other thing that was surprising to me was how many people wrote in stories about their experiences, particularly in prison and in jail. We don't often find that people take the time to write long narratives about their experiences, but we did in this case. Most of them are heartbreaking, again, what you would expect. But even here, we saw a diversity of opinions. Some people who had positive experiences or who had neutral experiences writing their stories, as well as a lot of people who, as I said, stories you would never want anyone to experience. I'd love to hear from Andrew if he has some thoughts as well.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing that. I think one of the things for me is that Black and Pink, we work oftentimes with people that are currently incarcerated, as well as people that have been formerly incarcerated. And so those stories are something that really, I was glad that we took the time to allow the space for people to share those experiences. So unfortunately, a lot of the things in those I do hear on a regular basis, and it is heartbreaking and it's difficult. I think something that really stood out to me that I think sometimes we don't think about when it comes to people that are incarcerated is access to medications. And so this report showed that nearly 2/3, so almost 65% of those that were detained who took medication experienced at least a 2-week or longer interruption within the last 5 years, a 2-week or longer interruption and being able to have access to those medications. So this could have been anything from hormone replacement. This could have been antiretrovirals. So for individuals that are living with HIV or other medications that need antiretrovirals, heart medications, psych medications, all those sort of things, right? And we talk a lot about systems are set up to help rehabilitate people, or they are here to provide better care than we could in the community, right? And we're not seeing that. We're not seeing that reflected in people's experiences. We're not seeing that they have access to their medications. We're not seeing that they're able to live a healthy, thriving life. And if you can't have access to your medications, how are you supposed to focus on the other things that you need to? How are you supposed to feel like you can be able to achieve the things that you want to when you can't even have access to these medical things that you need that are really important and pertinent to your existence as a human being? So I think that is something that really stuck out to us, and we've had a lot of conversations about, and even recognizing that those that identified as living with a disability, they were even more likely to see an interruption than those who didn't, identify as having a disability. So it just continues to show this is an issue that we need to be talking about. This is an issue that we need to be pushing on these systems to ensure that folks that are currently experiencing the carceral system, and we can talk more about that existence in a bit, but the people that are currently experiencing the carceral system have access to everyday medical needs and access to their medications. So that's something that really stood out to me from this report. And I think we as a team have talked about this quite a bit.
And Andrew, can I add to that? And thank you for raising that example, because that was actually a surprising finding, because I don't think we went in expecting the numbers that we got about missed medication and why that is such an important issue impacting our community members. And as we think about like the time that we're in right now, where over 400 plus bills have been introduced around the country attacking LGBTQ people, specifically young, trans and non-binary people, and their access to medical care. This is an issue impacting all of our community members. Who has access to medical care? Who should be making those decisions? And we need to make sure that in the fights and conversations that we're having, that we're not leaving out people who are in prisons and jails and other people when we're talking about access to healthcare for our community members.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Richard, and thank you so much to Andrew and Sanjan for sharing this impactful and very revealing findings. I personally read the report, and that was sort of the one that stood out the most. Missing a medication, everyone should agree that that is horrific. So thank you for going into more detail about how important it is for policymakers to look at that. One last question before we turn over to viewers' questions. And remember, for those watching this live on Facebook or YouTube, you could still send your questions live, and we will see if we could have time to add them in the Q&A section. And as you send your questions, those that are watching this live, I would like to ask Richard and Andrew if you can tell us, now that the report has been released, what's next? What are the recommendations, right, that the report made for these issues, and what are Lambda Legal and Black and Pink next steps and actions to address the issues raised here?
Well, in the report, and also the executive summary and the spotlight report, we include a recommendation section that might be a little different than what you've seen in other reports. We wanted these documents to really speak to different audiences. So we broke it down by recommendations for at the individual level, what can you do? For policymakers, what are some things that you can do with some specific policy recommendations? And also for people who are working within the criminal legal system, what are steps that they can do, or actions that they can do to hold those responsible for abuse and discrimination in the systems accountable. Andrew?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we really focused on in this report, which was I think a beautiful coming together of bringing Black and Pink to the table as well, is we really had to have some conversation around, are we only going to focus on calling into question things that are more reformist centered, maybe, or are we also thinking about what does abolition look like? What does the existence of some of these systems look like? And really pushing back on how money is, how money is spent in communities, but really centering communities. So one of the things that we talk about in the reports is that there is a place to really focus on community, really look at how can we invest in community, ensure that there are different transformative justice practices. How do we figure out, how do we address harm within a community? There are a lot of people that have been doing this work for quite some time that has really been laying the foundation for us. So we really have this an amazing breadth of knowledge around transformative justice. We just need the support financially, and also we need the ability to be able to address harm within communities and give communities a say in how things are navigated. What does safety look like and mean like to them? And then what do they want to see happen? Because oftentimes when we are involved in practices within the system, those that are harmed don't even have a say always in how things go. Some other things that we really looked at, and I really stood out to me, is just supporting trans and non-binary or gender non-conforming leadership and those led movements. And a lot of times we'll say supporting them is saying, you got this. We see you over there, we're gonna get out of the way, you got this. That's not support. That's seeking the easy way out. That is harmful. We need to figure out, how do we actually support? How do we be there and say, hey, I'm with you. What do you need? When do we want me to jump in? How do I jump in? What does support look like for you? Do you need me to talk to a funder, to connect a funder to you? Do you need me to come speak on an issue so that you don't have to be responsible for the education? We have to really think about, what does it look like to stand side by side with trans-led movements, especially Black and Brown trans-led movements. And that's something that has been a major issue and a major concern. I have the privilege of working with a lot of trans leaders across this country, and folks are tired. Folks are really tired. It's a rough time right now. And so this work is personal. It's not just work, it's personal, it's a lived experience. So support looks like being there, standing by their side, seeing when you can pick up the rein, when you can jump in and help support. So that's another piece that maybe seem unconventional, but is essential when we look at addressing the harms of the carceral system.
Thank you so much, Andrew, for that in detail explanation and overview. So now we will turn it to questions from viewers. Many of you are watching on Facebook or YouTube, and throughout the RSVP period and today we have received questions from the audience, so we would like to answer some of those. The first question comes from Stephanie, and it is, what can we do in our personal capacities to support this issue?
Thank you so much for that question. As we've been saying throughout, and you'll see it in the report, we want folks to take this report, read it, and use it. We want you to come up with new ideas, to look at the recommendations as some guidelines, but really it's going to be, what are the needs of your community, and how can you implement and use this data in the work that you're doing? But we do have some action steps that we want to share with the audience today. Read and share the report, protectedandserved.org, and please use that on your social media and your emails to networks. We hope it's easy to remember the name. It's protectedandserved.org. invite us to speak with your organization. It's a wealth of information and data that we're putting out there in the reports, but we're happy to, where schedule permits, be able to speak directly with your organization or with your community members. We value the support and donations from our community members and audiences. You can make donations to Lambda Legal at lambdalegal.org/donate, and also to Black and Pink National at blackandpink.org/donate. We use these donations to support the work that we're doing with projects like Protected and Serve. And you can sign up for updates. Again, protectedandserve.org. I really want to invite you all to check out the website, because on there, not only will you find the full report, the executive summary, and the spotlight report, but we're going to keep updating it with more information about the project. And so we really hope that folks engage with the website, engage with the report, and share it.
Thank you so much, Richard. The next question is, what is the current state of data on queer people and people living with HIV and the criminal legal system? How much do we know about these issues? And I think, Samjen, can you take this question?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I mean, on the one hand, we know a lot because we've just done this study, and we're not done publishing results from the study. We're going to continue to look at various populations, various things that we found, and continue to publish results. So for folks who are just now looking at protectedandserve.org, keep coming back, because there will be more as time goes on. I would really urge people who are interested in this topic to look at Black and Pink's publication, Coming Out of Concrete Closets. I think it's one of the most important pieces of community-based research on this topic. We know more about LGBTQ plus people and people living with HIV as crime victims or survivors of bad experiences than we know about them as people who participate in the criminal legal system. So while the Williams Institute has done some really amazing work looking at the National Crime Victimization Survey and examining LGBTQ plus populations there, there's much less that we know about what it's really like to be an LGBTQ person or a person living with HIV confronting some of these pieces of the criminal legal system. And I think that's what's so important about this project, and so important about follow-up work that other researchers will do.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Samjen. The next question comes from Daniel, and the question reads, how does one deal with past discrimination events that leave long-lasting barriers? Daniel doesn't specify what are those barriers, but we could imagine, and I would like to ask Andrew, that works with a formerly incarcerated population.
Thank you. I think that's a great question. Thank you for that question, Daniel. I think one of the things, first of all, is a lot of times when we experience something, we put a lot of blame on ourselves. And so I think understanding that there are a lot of things that have led to why we hurt, and what has hurt us and what has harmed us, and understanding that there's nothing wrong with you. And I think that's something that when we're experiencing a lot of discrimination and a lot of hurt and a lot of hate, then sometimes we tend to internalize that. So I think that's the first thing I talk about as far as like just ourselves and our own healing, and understanding the need to be able to recognize that, yeah, something did happen, and we don't have to give excuses for other people. Well, maybe it happened because of XYZ, but acknowledging, yeah, it happened. As far as addressing it in the broader sense, I think we can look at all sorts of different practices, like looking at transformative justice, understanding not only what is the role in the players that caused harm and this person that experienced harm, but how did the broader community play a role in that? How did we all play a role in allowing there to be room and space for discrimination to continue happening? We all have a responsibility in that as well, and we all contributed to that person's harm, even if we didn't specifically do something. And so I think that there are ways to be able to go through transformative justice and practices, and understanding that accountability practices, and thinking about how do I get what I need from that person, but also how do I get what I need from the people around me that allowed this to happen, whether that's the systems, my community, my people, my friends that maybe didn't say anything. So I think that all of that becomes a part of that issue. And lastly, I would say just find somebody that you can confide in, that you feel like you trust and is really there to support you, is really about you and not what they get out of supporting you. And I think that that's something that can help you navigate a situation where you have experienced a lot of harm and figure out what is next for you.
Thank you so much, Andrew. And the next question comes from the Q Law Foundation of Washington, where it's actually two questions. Was there a race or gender breakdown in the impressions of police usefulness? And I'm guessing that there might be something more about race and gender disparities in other parts of the criminal legal system. And the second question is, what policy recommendations are there for attorneys who are in direct contact with communities' legal needs?
I can take the first question, and then perhaps Richard can say more about the second question, since I am not an attorney at all. So unfortunately, we found what you would expect in that transgender, gender nonconforming people and non-binary people are more likely to have negative experiences with the police and less likely to find them fair and to take them seriously and to behave responsibly. That's what we would expect. And the same for people of color. I would say particularly Black and Indigenous communities. Folks who took this survey, participants who took this survey in those communities were much more likely to say that they had negative experiences and that they hadn't been taken seriously or treated fairly. So, about what you'd expect, unfortunately. I would add also that some of these intersectional issues that we haven't had as much of a chance to discuss, for example, issues related to immigration detention and issues related to sex work, are also very much affected by the intersection of being LGBTQ plus, being a person living with HIV, and race and gender. Again, in the direction you would expect. So pick your statistic. Sadly, there are a lot of them. If anyone out there still doesn't understand and still doesn't believe that these disparities exist, we've got a lot of information to change their mind. I want to make sure Richard has plenty of time to address the issue raised in the other question as well.
Great, thank you, Samjin. And as you'll see in the recommendation section, we know that folks play multiple roles. So as an attorney myself, I'm a community member. I'm someone who has had loved ones, family members directly impacted by incarceration. So we want folks to look at these recommendations again with your multiple hats on, knowing that there's crossover. So for attorneys, some of the specific recommendations we include is some policy changes. Advocating for and supporting the full decriminalization of sex work. That not only is a legal issue, but it's a policy issue of working with your state and local legislators to get that passed. The full decriminalization of sex work, for example, a bill in New York State, the Stop Violence into Sex Trade Act is pending. Getting involved in ways outside of the courthouse. And then inside of the courthouse, calling for court reform, prohibiting discrimination in jury service. And then we also discussed the applying non-discrimination laws that might exist in your state already that might have exceptions or do not include some of these different institutions within the criminal legal system, including the courthouse, including in prisons and jails, that the state non-discrimination laws that are inclusive of LGBTQ people, so sexual orientation and gender identity and expression, explicitly includes these places. So then again, people know what their rights are when they are going into these systems. With Lambda Legal's Fair Courts Project, who does a lot of work training advocates and attorney advocates and also judges, that has been one of the big things that we have hoped one, reaffirms and protects people's rights in the courthouse, but also as a education tool of how can we provide, advocate for people in a fair and just way. And so I would also encourage folks to look at Lambda Legal's Fair Courts Project in addition to these reports for ways that attorneys can do things both inside the courthouse and outside in their advocacy for the community.
Thank you so much, Richard. And this question comes from Cook and Freyer. Will participants of their survey have access to the report? And will it be available in libraries for people who are incarcerated to read?
Yeah, I can start with that question. Yeah, so we are connected to, Black and Pink is connected to almost 20,000 inside members nationally that we send a newsletter to. And so I know one of the ways that we want to try to bring this report to them is giving some of the access through our newsletter, and then also looking at other ways that we can get them access to jailhouse lawyers or things like libraries, and also ensuring that everybody that we came in contact with that we asked questions about, as far as how do we approach asking questions around sex work, all the community folks we connected with, we're sending the reports to them so that they have access. And then also looking at ways that we can help support folks that want to get that in printed materials so that they don't have to necessarily pay for things to be printed. And that's something that we are working on as well, as far as Black and Pink National, for the folks that we serve and support.
Thank you so much, Andrew. And if any of the speakers don't have anything else to add, I would like to thank all of you, the viewers, for attending today and sending all of your questions as well. Thank all of the panelists and the co-authors for this very important report that is going to address and support new research, advocacy, litigation, and policy efforts to address the discrimination and abuse experienced by LGBTQ people plus and people living with HIV in the criminal legal system to increase accountability throughout this system. So now we want to leave you, all of those watching and people that you want to share with, all of the actions and things that you can take and do to support this issue. First, you can read and share this report at protectedandserved.org. You can also invite us or any of the speakers today here to speak with your organization for a training, for a panel, a conference, and you can send your request to protectedandserved.org/request, as well as you could donate. You could donate to two of the organizations that led this report, including Lambda Legal at lambdalegal.org/donate, and or support Black and Pink National at blackandpink.org/donate, both which are nonprofits and can support the work that these organizations are doing. And finally, sign up for the updates also at the protectedandserved.org website. And we will be follow both organizations on social media, where you will be seeing more of updates in the coming days and weeks. And yes, you will also, for those that have asked, this recording will stay live in Facebook and YouTube, and you could share it as well after this live ends. It will be live and recorded, so you will be able to share the link with your communities and your networks. Again, I want to thank you, all of the panelists, for working so hard throughout these years on this very important report, as well all of you watching and taking the time to join us today. Thank you and have a great week.